Hey everyone. Well, as you see, there's a carburetor in front of me, so you know what this means. It's time to go back to Quadrajet school again. I got some good questions through email on YouTube about the videos I made in the past, and I thought they were really good questions. I thought I would go ahead and try to make some videos to answer those questions, and I thought it'd be the best thing to do is try to just make a video because they're good questions, like I said, and I wanted everyone to get the information. So I thought I will do this video about the various vacuum connections that you see on a Quadrajet. Now, this is something I've had people ask many times, not necessarily just to me, but I've read it in a lot of forums and things like that, postings, and people continuously always want to know what these different vacuum connections are for. So I'm going to do my best to explain all this. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to run the vacuum lines or anything like that, because you need to, whatever kind of vehicle you have, your best thing to do is going to be get a vacuum diagram so you know how you know where to run the vacuum lines too. I'm going to explain what they are on the carburetor, but as far as the rest of it, that's going to be up to you guys to do that, because they're all different. I don't know how many different combinations you could say there are, but there's got to be tons of it. So let's just start off with this carburetor. This is a pretty representative carburetor. It's got all the common connections, and so I think it'll make a good teaching tool. We're looking at the front of this carburetor. As you can see, got your throttle connections on the left. This is driver's side, this is left of the car. Choke over here on the right, passenger side of it. So the first thing you're going to notice up top, you can notice this tube here. This is pretty common on Quadrajets. You'll see it on most of them. This is just a vent tube. This is for the float chamber. Just lets vents out. When gas gets hot, expands. Vapor has to go somewhere. So if it didn't, it might kick over, try to flood the carburetor, kick the gas out into here just because of heat expansion. So that's what this is. And as you can tell, it's inside where the air cleaner mounts, so it's not going to be exposed to the atmosphere, that kind of pollution type thing. So okay, looking at the front and kind of in relation to that, you'll see this carburetor, there's a port right here that's open. Normally these have a short piece of tube on them, metal tubing. This one's missing it. This is just one of my spare carburetors that's not been used in a long time. So what this is the carburetor bowl connection. This is another vent connection, and this normally always leads to the vacuum. This is the vent line for the charcoal canister, which is normally located on your fender somewhere out near the fender well, left or right, wherever. But that's usually what this always is. This is a fuel vapor connection. It's just when the car shut off and it heat soaks, fuel vapors travel out of this into the charcoal canister, and then they're stored and then reburned. Now this one's very important. A lot of people ask about this. This is what's called a ported vacuum source, and just about every Quadrajet has this, and this is where you would hook up vacuum advance to, because this is ported vacuum. And that's generally where you always, like I just said, hook up your distributor advance or EGR. EGR and distributor advance usually always use ported vacuum, because ported vacuum, real quickly to tell you the difference between ported vacuum and manifold vacuum, which you usually find down here. Manifold vacuum is, ported vacuum does not exist at a normal idle speed. Ported vacuum only starts as a vacuum source once the engine starts climbing in RPMs, like 1,000, 1,200 RPMs on up, because you can see, if you look at the center line of the throttle blades, which is about right here, it's located above this. So this, like I just said, this vacuum source doesn't exist until the engine starts to climb in RPMs, and that's because that things like distributor advance and EGR, you don't want them getting a vacuum signal at idle, because if you open the EGR valve up, that exhaust gas recirculation valve up at a low idle, then it's not going to idle for shit or at all. So you don't want that. So you have to have some source of vacuum that comes in later. And same thing with distributor advance. You don't normally need distributor advance at idle. So that's the very reason for this one. Now, manifold vacuum obviously is going to exist at an idle. So, you know, that's for things that you always want a vacuum signal to, like brake booster and whatever, PCV valve and stuff like that. You know, if you're ever wondering, you know, well, which are they? That's easy to tell, because when it's idling, if you pull the line off, you can hear it sucking air, you know, whichever, or you can put your finger to it if it's a small one, and you'll suck your finger in, and this one won't. So that's a good way to tell that. Now up here, you see on the right front, now I know this is what I just said, this is above the center line of the throttle blades, but this is actually a manifold vacuum source right here. It's got a drilled passage down, and so what this normally does on the Quadrajet, this is the feed for the thermostatic air cleaner. You ever notice on your air cleaner, it's got, like on the snout of it, it's got a little valve. Well, you got a line that runs off here, and it comes up under the air cleaner. It's got a little thermostatic valve actually mounted also in the air cleaner somewhere. It's got two ports on it to kind of pump down like this, and you run vacuum through that, and then a vacuum line comes back out to the air cleaner out here somewhere. The reason for that is that's a vacuum, you know, manifold vacuum is fine for that. It needs to operate anytime the engine's running. So what that little valve is in the air cleaner is it's a temperature valve, and it's just a very simple bimetallic little valve, and it closes off. It opens when it's cold and lets vacuum flow. It shuts that little, it's a little flapper valve, if you know what I'm talking about. In the snout of the air cleaner comes open, it lets hot air come up from the manifold. Now there's a lot of people that don't have this system intact anymore, or they don't want it intact. You know, they think it's some sort of something bad against them, is going to cost them horsepower. Of course, their engine doesn't warm up for crap anymore, but we won't get into that. That's what that does. Alright, now over here, you take a look at this one. See how this is another vacuum line that comes out, a little tube. It's got a short section of rubber line that connects. This is your front vacuum brake. Now, normally on a Quadrajet, this helps to crack open the choke valve up here. This one's a little bit out of adjustment, but normally it'll kind of, if it extends all the way in when it's running, it'll kind of pull that open just a hair, just to keep it from loading up and running rich. So that always goes to that. Okay, you look down here at the bottom. This one's got 1, 2, 3 vacuum ports. Now some may have 1, some may have 2, some may have 3. There's been some have 4. But generally speaking, any of these down on the bottom like this, this is a base plate. You'll see there's kind of a joint here. This one's all gunked up. This carburetor has no telling how many miles on it, but there's actually, this is the carburetor body and this is the base plate. It's two separate pieces, got a gasket between it. That's where that's not a vacuum port, that's where your mixture screw is supposed to go. I think I must have borrowed them out of this one. So you always know a vacuum port because it protrudes out. See, it's got space here. So alright, well, what do these do? This is normally what's called a purge port for the charcoal canister. If you ever look on your canister, it's usually got anywhere from 2 to 4 to 5 connections on the top of it. One will say on top of the canister, one will say tank, one will say carb vent, it will say carb, one will say vacuum, or it may say purge, something like that. One of them, to purge the charcoal canister, usually always leads back to a vacuum port, and it's normally this one. See, this is kind of a mid-size, it's not the smallest, it's not the largest, it's kind of a mid-size tube. That's usually generally what that does. Alright, this is an important one. This is found on just about every modern Quadrajet, fairly modern Quadrajet. This large one here, this is a vacuum port. And this normally always runs the PCV valve, which is over in one of your valve covers. Maybe on the left one, maybe on the right one, but you'll know it. The PCV valve sticks up. That's positive crankcase ventilation. If you've replaced your valve cover and you just have two breathers on the valve covers, then you've totally disabled this system anyway, so don't worry about it. Just be sure it's plugged off. But that's what runs your PCV valve. Now, you know, you could probably run the PCV valve off another one, but it probably wouldn't work right. This is sized appropriately for that tube and that valve, so be sure you use this. Now these things, if you have a carburetor like this one that's been through a lot and it's got a lot of miles on it, sometimes these things plug up in here where this port goes into the base plate, so it'd be a good idea occasionally to make sure this thing is free. It's not got carbon locked up in it. Now this vacuum port here, you know, I don't remember what it goes to on this particular Quadrajet. This is just another, it should be a manifold vacuum. You need to test this if you have one. This era Quadrajets, this is about a 80 or 79 or 80, 78, 79, 80, something like that. And they had a lot of vacuum operated gizmos on the engine for pollution and stuff like that. So a lot of times they'll have just an extra port here. If you don't need it any longer, just cap it off. You know, you don't necessarily have to find the line that goes to it. You know, just use the ones that you need. Okay, let's look on the back here. Alright, now this is fairly common setup for a Quadrajet. Now, the top, right here in the center, this is a vacuum line. Now this is not the size tube and the type of tube that you would normally find on most Quadrajets. This is a Buick carburetor, I think, and it's got, normally what you'll see back here, you'll see a very large opening with a screwed in connector and a screwed in metal line coming out of it. That's always usually your brake booster line. A lot of Chevys and Oldsmobiles use that. Buicks and Pontiacs, sometimes they take the power brake booster vacuum. It comes off a T back here on the intake, so they don't use this for that. This is still a vacuum port, manifold vacuum port. You can use it for whatever you need, or you can cap it off with something if you don't need it. You should be able to see that. Just find the brake booster and then follow the line, and it should, you know, like I said, some of them go to the intake, and then some of them will have a metal line or at least a big connector that goes in here. I wouldn't try to use a small connection like this for your brake booster. It's too small. So now this over here, this one is fairly common for a Quadrajet also. This is just this is a manifold vacuum port, and this comes out. What this is, this runs this rear vacuum brake. Now someone asked me in an email, I don't remember your username, that was a good email that you sent me. I hope this is going to answer some of your questions, this and the other videos also. But what this does here, I think I told you guys in another video earlier that some of these have one of these, some have two. Now usually a Quadrajet always has one if it's not got the divorce type of choke, but even so it should still have one. But this one has two, and all this does, this is just an assist back here. It's another vacuum brake. It's got a linkage on it, skews the dirt. Look up here when I pull this back, watch the flap up here. See how it pops that open? That's just your pull off, that's your choke pull off. So essentially, I think on what's going to happen on this one, this is basically this is your secondary vacuum brake. It means this is the one that's going to control the opening rate of your secondary doors to slow them down so that they don't flutter. Remember I told you about this in an earlier video. So this is a very good example here of how a stock Quadrajet linkage is supposed to look. So take a good look at this. So this one that's got two provisions for two of them. This is your choke pull off, because that's what it does, and then this is going to be primarily for your secondary air doors. So you need to keep both of them on here. Don't discard them just because you think it's plotting against you somehow. So, okay guys, well, I'm going to shut this video down and post it, and can get into another video. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.